I predict a Duke's victory.
Welcome to episode 11 of the Crush Fantasy Football Podcast with your hosts, Dolan and James. What up, Dolan? Dude, I always thought about that. Sorry, I cut you off already. But, like, if I go James and Dolan, it just makes everyone think of James Dolan, and everyone hates James Dolan, right?
Good point.
So it has to be Dolan and James.
Yeah.
Do you like being first or second?
First. I'll take first.
Dolan and James. What's up?
Or you
Happy
gotta throw
Sunday.
something. Or you got to throw something in there like I'm James McGrath and I'm here with my co-host Dolan. Something like that. And so you break up the names a little bit.
Like I'm introducing myself to a conference or like a new team, an icebreaker. I don't think
you need to go full elevator pitch and give a fun fact about yourself.
My fun fact. What'd you do this weekend, man? Did you win some poker?
You know the answer to that. I won as much in poker as you did.
I had more fun though.
Debatable. But yeah,
I had more chips.
There's a beautiful evening. I mean, you mean like Tostitos? Because we both walked away with 0 chips.
Yeah, Tostitos and legs.
Okay, you're really struggling with the dual purpose words right now.
This is my unintentional favorite opening we've ever done because it's been all over the place.
Yeah, I think we got to get out of this quickly. You want to move us on to our favorite segment?
Yeah. All right, take Montezuma. I think we know the drill by now. We're going to get our takes out of the way, a little purge, if you will. Take Montezuma is presented by Soiree Season. If you're looking for the next generation wedding registry company, if the big day is coming up, check out Soiree Season, SOIREE, with the little accent. Use promo code CRUSHFF for 40% off. Dolan, fire us up with a football hot take.
Yeah, so this one I don't think is crazy spicy. This, I will admit, is one of my weaker ones of the year, but it's compounding on a common theme that we've talked about a couple times now, and that's the Cowboys' passing offense being pretty strong this year. And I think I'm ready to go as spicy as saying Dak Prescott is going to finish top 3 in passing yards this year. I think, we've talked a ton about the receivers. We've talked a ton about the game script. And so, again, I'm just ready to make this my official hot take now. I don't know if he's necessarily going to finish as a top 3 fantasy quarterback. Obviously, touchdowns, and I don't think Prescott's going to be running the ball quite like he was back, 8 to 10 years ago. But I think that all signs point to the Cowboys just slinging the ball a ton, and the guys that are going to be catching those passes, I think, are fantastic. The best Prescott's had since the Amari Cooper-CeeDee Lamb duo. And so I'm just expecting really big things from this passing offense. I don't think you're going to disagree with me too much here. Maybe you won't go as far as high as 3. I know you're at least on a similar page with me here.
Yep, super similar page with that passing offense. Do you know where he finished 3 years ago? 2 years ago.
2 years ago. Not off the top of my head, but I do know that was his monster season, if I remember correctly. I can't remember the exact rank, so hit me with it if you got it.
Yeah, I just pulled it up. Number 3 overall. 4,516 behind Jared Goff and Tua. Shocking.
Wow.
So he was right there.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think he should have went for number 1. I think top 3 is definitely in the cards. I think number 1 is probably in the cards. All right. My hot take, my non-football hot take. I don't think people should be allowed to work in the same industry as their parents. So if your dad or mom was a doctor, you shouldn't be allowed to be a doctor. If your dad or mom was a consultant, you shouldn't be allowed to be a consultant. If your dad or mom was a welder, you can't be a welder. You have to think differently. I think this is the reason why nepotism exists. It's too easy to just do what your parents did. One, it's bad for you, right? You don't explore, you don't find what you love. You just do what your parents did, right? Maybe NFL player might be an exception to this. I don't know. I think Marvin Harrison Jr. should have to go play basketball or something. But also, it's bad for the industry. There's no imagination if your parents just tell you everything. You're not coming at it with a beginner's mind because you've You've talked to your parents. You know how they think. So I don't think you should be allowed. I think it should be forbidden societally, and you should be shamed if you do it. Hot take.
I don't even know where to begin with this one. I feel like so many coaches, like think about football coaches. I feel like football
Exactly.
coaches in particular, it's such
Exactly. That's the
a
point
like
that proves the
family
rule.
tree here.
Yes.
But we all still watch football. Like we all still love football. It's not none of us say, "Oh, I'm not going to enjoy football as a sport because of the nepotism associated with it." I don't know. This one's crazy to me.
It's
What about
not.
like a
It's so.
family business? So you're just saying family businesses shouldn't exist?
There's no such thing as a family business. You should have to bring someone in from the outside. No such thing as family businesses. Yes, like all these family businesses, like the Redstones, the Ellis, like all of it. Like they get worse once the kid. You've watched Succession? You
Yeah,
saw
of course.
when the kids run the business. That's what happens when nepotism.
That's a
That's the
fiction
point.
show.
No. That's based on really the Murdochs. There's a lot of. Come on, HBO does better than fiction. I also think with the coaching stuff, we still like football, but just imagine the innovation where football would be as a product if there wasn't just the same recycled kids of coaches. We would get the mathematicians who can't be mathematicians because their parents were mathematicians. They'd go be in football. It's a whole different mindset. It would move the game forward.
I can't give you this one. I'm sorry. I just can't. I can't. The thing about counterpoint, think about compound interest. You start how much better the game is because you have that starting point. Because your dad was a football coach, when you're 16 years old and decide, hey, I want to start coaching, you're not starting from scratch. You have a mentor, you have a built-in system, and sure, maybe you are regurgitating some existing ideas,
Regurgitate.
but it helps the learning curve so much if you're able to rely on someone who's that close with you. You're
Yeah,
crazy.
my mom wasn't a podcaster or a YouTuber. All right. Take Montezuma presented by Soiree Season. All right, we're gonna do something pretty cool today. Today we're gonna go through our top 10 running backs for 2025 redraft season. We'll sprinkle a little dynasty in there, but it's mostly a redraft conversation and the outlook from a floor ceiling perspective for 2025. Dolan, if you want to kick us off with number 10 on your list of top running backs for 2025.
Yeah, so I will start it off. I think what jumped out at me is when looking at my list and your list before this is different from the receivers pod. We actually do have some different names on the list. Obviously, near the top, it's a little similar, differently ranked. But it's nice to see that we have a little bit of variety here. Of course, as I say this, I know you and I have the exact same number 10 on the list, which is Ashton Genty. I think this is a little lower than consensus for most on Genty. And for me, I look at him as just an extremely, extremely, extremely high floor draft pick as a rookie. I think I'm not super pumped about the Raiders' offenses general. I don't think Genty's going to get a ton of support from the ecosystem around him. But I do think Chip Kelly's going to want to run the ball a lot. And they really don't have anybody else in that backfield who I feel remotely comfortable with. So I think Genty's just walking in to an absolute bell cow role right from the start. You don't spend a top 10 NFL draft pick on a running back if you're not planning on making him the focal point or a focal point of your offense. And so I think Genty's just going to get fed the ball an absolute ton. And then that's not even getting into how dominant he was as a prospect. There was a reason he was a top 10 draft pick. There's a reason teams were willing to say, we don't care that he's a running back. He's this good and he's this worthy of a first round pick anyway. So I think just on volume alone, he is going to have an extremely, extremely high floor. I think he's, as close to locked in as you can say a rookie is to finish as an RB1. I just have a hard time squinting and seeing him cracking the top, 5 or 6 because I do have some concerns around the offenses. And that's why I'm not putting him too much higher on the list. But I know you got him in the same spot, James. Is your line of thinking here the same as mine or anything different on your end that you want to call out?
Bingo. I think you hit the flow. He's a rookie on an offense that there's a lot of projecting going on. We're saying, oh, Geno Smith's here. Oh, Chip Kelly's here. Oh, the offensive line is average, could be better. And it's not, none of these things are certain, plus he's a rookie. So I think there's a lot of unknown. And when you combine all the unknown, it's the reason he's 10 on my list and not 6, where I think most people have him. But I think you're underselling the ceiling, to be honest. So Mike Clay, with his projections, has him at 270 carries and 80 targets, which would have been third in total touches in 2024. So that's elite usage. And Mike Clay's kind of the standard, at least for me, from a projection standpoint. There's obviously they took him sixth overall. He's an incredible prospect. Why wouldn't they give him the ball argument? And I think we have the template. It's Saquon's rookie year. So a mix of elite prospect, average team. They feed him a ball a ton on the ground and through the air. And I think Saquon finished as RB2 overall. So I think the ceiling is there. I think you hit the floor perfectly, but there's a lot of unknown to put him ahead of some of these other guys. That's where I leaned at.
Yeah, I'm not saying he has a weak ceiling by any stretch of the imagination. Even if you're at 5 or so, that's awesome. I just don't see him in the, I don't see a Saquon Barkley last year's season out of him under kind of any circumstances.
Yeah, definitely not a Saquon last year's season. All right, so number 9. I'll go number 9 on my list is Bucky Irving. So I think you have to look at Bucky Irving's season kind of in two parts. There's weeks 1 through 5 when he's getting his legs under him. He's a rookie last year. And then there's the arbitrary line I picked is week 6, which is when he first got over 50% of the snaps in that backfield. So he averaged 16.4 fantasy points per game from that point on, which would have been 13. The Bucks have a top 10, I think, ish offensive line, plus Rashad White dealing with the groin injury and Rashad White not being the best running back in the world, I think are a lot of reasons why you think Bucky's workload this year will be a lot bigger than Bucky's workload last year. But he was awesome last year. So he finished 10th in total rushing yards, 9th in total receiving yards, 10th in receptions, and 10th in yards per route run. So once Bucky got his legs under him, he turned into a really good runner and passer. So kind of a dual threat. So I think he's a very good running back. There's opportunities for more touchdowns in 2025. He didn't score a receiving touchdown last year. And so I think there's a lot to like with Bucky Irving as the 9th overall running back.
Yeah, I don't have him too much higher. I think we're on a very similar page here. I have him at 8 on my list. And I think, again, we go back to what we were saying about Genty. There is proof of concept for Bucky Irving. Yep. And like you said, it did take a little bit for him to get going. But then once I think he and the coaching staff realized what this combination of putting him on the field looks like and what that can do for their offense, they were just like, all right, we can't stop giving this guy the ball enough. And I think that trend's going to carry into next season. I don't think he's going to be a Genty level bell cow because of the other names that you did mention. Like I keep seeing headlines about how the Bucs are extremely excited to even get Sean Tucker, their number 3 back, involved. But I think Bucky's just proved it with the efficiency. He's good at every part of the game, where I think even on a 60 to 70% workload rather than a 75 to 85% workload, he can finish as a pretty high-end RB1. Bucky's just a crazy efficient player. I'm buying the talent, and the talent happens to be in one of the better offenses in the league.
Yep.
And it's just kind of a no-brainer. I really like where he's going at cost too, in like the middle-ish of the second round, give or take. I think if he gets the acclimated to the offense now role, and so you eliminate those first 5 or 6 weeks, you just give him that over the course of a full season. I'm all in. I think that is where you do start to get into the top 3 to 5 ceiling. I think is what put him ahead of Genty. It's like we've seen the proof of concept. We know the floor is high, but the ecosystem around him, even though it can take away from some of his touches, I think just gives him so many more scoring opportunities.
Does the size concern you at all?
Yeah, a little bit, but I think that does concern me in the sense of like, I'm kind of already accounting for that, knowing his workload's probably going to be a smidge smaller. Like, I don't think you're going to see many games where Bucky Irving has 25 touches, but I think he's consistently going to be in that 15 to 20 range and be highly efficient with them.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I am with you. You want to hit your number 9, the most fun one on the board.
All right. So number 9, it's definitely my spiciest take. Probably no surprise to everybody who's been listening to the podcast so far. Is TreVeyon Henderson. And I realize this is way higher than consensus rankings for most, but I am sticking to my guns of I think he's the best running back for fantasy production out of this entire draft class. And so his ADP is creeping up, and I'm starting to adjust my rankings to put him in a position where I can guarantee that I get him on my roster. I've talked about him a ton on this pod, so I'll try and go pretty quick, but I think the pass catching role is going to be an absolute gold mine for fantasy. And then when I look at the Patriots offense, I think there's a very, very, very real chance he becomes the focal point of it very quickly. There's not really any other receivers that scare me. Ramondre Stevenson is, fine running back, but not an exciting one. And so I think when the Pats just need an explosive play, they're going to find ways to get Travion the ball, whether that is as a pass catcher, whether that is as a runner. And so I just think there's so much upside. I think he's the type of guy that could just have those boom weeks that really win a week for you. And then, I don't want to overreact too much to preseason, but some of the highlights, some of what he's putting out on tape has just looked tremendous. And so it's kind of like he's starting to check every single box for me. And so I would much rather just be too high on Travion and be overexposed to him than risk missing out because his ADP is flying up the boards right now. So I know you like Henderson, James, but certainly not as much as I do, certainly not above Genty. But yeah, I'd love to hear, maybe you pour some cold water on this, or maybe I don't want to hear it, but maybe our viewers need to hear it so they don't overreact quite as much as I might be.
Yeah, so I don't have Travion on my list, and trust me, I wanted to pour cold water on this so hard. But the more I thought about it, the more I reluctantly land with you. I don't know if I'm ready to say top 10, but it's lining up. So the comp that I came to is Kamara's rookie year, where he only had 120 attempts, but he had 100 targets, 81 catches, essentially 800 receiving yards, 5 receiving touchdowns. And so I think we both agree that Ramondre is not going away. He's not going to be a zero. He'll run a little goal line as long as he doesn't fumble. But I think the path is there to the kind of upside you're talking about. You having him top 10, me even considering this, I think he has to be the best value in drafts right now. Because in I think redrafts, he's going around like 5th round, 10-team league, maybe late 4th, 12-team league. And we're talking top 10 running back here. So, yeah. I mean, I wanted to pour cold water on this one. I really did. But the more I thought about it, is he's explosive. They don't have many other options. They're going to use him. So as long as Drake May's comfortable checking down to the running back, which I think we're seeing he is, then Travion Henderson's going to have an awesome year receiving, probably a pretty good year running with explosive plays.
Question for you. Who has a bigger role in their offense this year? Ramondre Stevenson or the combination of Bucky Irving and Rashad White? Or excuse me, Sean Tucker and Rashad White.
The combination of Sean Tucker and Rashad.
It's kind of what I think so too. And it's like if we're this high on Bucky with that level of a role, like I think we very easily can be on Travion too.
I cannot wait to take him in the 4th and 5th round of every single draft I take this year. Or I do this year.
All right. Well, let's keep it moving to a much less exciting pick. I'm back to you.
My number 8. Yep. And he's not on your list, and he's not exciting, which is why I think he's probably being overlooked. So my next guy is Jonathan Taylor. We know the ceiling. So 4 years ago in 2021, he was number 1 overall fantasy points per game. I know that feels like a lifetime ago, but he has it in him. Last year, he was 7th overall in fantasy points per game. He's number 1 in opportunity. So there's no team that uses one running back more than the Colts do. There's nobody behind him that scares you one bit. And the Colts play a top 12 schedule. So they're going to run the ball a ton. They're not going to have much through the passing game. I'm not even sure it matters which of the quarterbacks start. Maybe Richardson could take some goal line work away from Jonathan Taylor, but I truly don't believe that. The Colts know who their bread and butter is. I think we're overlooking Jonathan Taylor because of a recent string of injury seasons, which is the floor. And so I think if you get a healthy Jonathan Taylor, he belongs in this group from a real running back perspective and from a fantasy running back perspective as all the guys on this list.
Yeah. I, like you said, don't have Taylor inside my top 10, but that doesn't mean I wouldn't be comfortable drafting him as a running back 1. Like if I start a draft with receiver, or receiver tight end or something like that, I don't feel like I'm going to be struggling at running back if Jonathan Taylor is my RB1. The reason I do have him outside though is because I think the same rationale I applied for Genty applies for Taylor here for the offense of just not being that exciting. And I think the Colts offense is actually going to be even less exciting than what we have in Vegas. And so I allow ecosystem to, influence my running back rankings more so than any other position. And I don't see Taylor catching a ton of passes is one way to kind of offset a bad offense. And so that's kind of what scared me away from putting him inside the top 10. But again, I have no problem treating him as a RB1 on a specific roster, or being very happy if you want to go heavy RB and making him my RB2.
Yeah, I just mean we saw it last year. They were terrible last year. Their quarterback situation was as bad, and he finished top 10 in fantasy points per game. So I think as long as he's healthy, I think they know they have one guy to run the ball, and they're going to give him the ball. And so, yeah, that's my guy.
I like it. All right, so what's next up is my number 7 then. This is a guy we both have at 7, so I know we're both pretty high on him relative to consensus. I think he's been getting a lot of steam lately as well, but probably not quite top 7 steam, and that is Chase Brown. I just, again, talking about offensive ecosystem, I absolutely love Chase Brown and the role he could have in this offense. Sure, the Bengals aren't exactly going to be a run it down your throat type of offense, but I think that's actually perfect for Brown. The comp that I keep coming back to for him, and I've heard other people make this as well, so I'm not going to take credit for it, is I really see an Austin Eckler, like a peak Austin Eckler type season coming from him. I think Brown is a fantastic back in space, and, similar to Bucky Irving, he's not going to be a guy who's seeing the rock 25, 30 times a game, especially not on the ground. But I think with the offense that he's in, I think he's going to catch a ton of passes. I think he's going to have a ton of opportunity for touchdowns. And then I think what separates him from someone like Bucky in my eyes is there's a lot less confidence for me in the names behind him on the depth chart. So I think super high-powered offense, extremely talented back, great pass-catching profile. I'm just extremely, extremely, extremely high on Chase Brown. And, I kind of downplayed some of these guys' ceilings a little earlier, but Brown is one of those guys who I would not be one bit surprised if we look back at the end of the season and it's like, hey, he was a top 3 running back.
It's funny you say RB3. So last year in 7 games without Zach Moss, he averaged 20.7 fantasy points per game, which would have put him RB3 last year. So obviously there's no Zach Moss in the picture. I think you already talked about the guys behind him. It's basically a Chase Brown backfield. Besides Travion, I think he's the guy I'm most excited to take. So he's 15th among running backs in total routes run. That's with sharing a backfield. He was decent with 1.77 yards per route run, 5th in receptions, 11 total touchdowns. I think the floor case here, and maybe we're out a little too much over our skis, is he good? So I think he was good last year. I think his yards per carry wasn't spectacular. I think as a runner, he's probably average to above average. I don't think anyone thinks he's elite. And so the downside case is, I guess it's that. Maybe some touchdown regression.
Yeah. I think I do have a little more confidence in that. I think you do have to acknowledge the downside case. But in what was such a stacked running back class that we've talked about a lot, the fact that the Bengals didn't take a guy until I think it was the 7th round in Taj Brooks, and they let Zach Moss walk, I think just makes me feel pretty good. I mean, I think Samaje Perine's back. He'll get some touches, but I think he's got the lion's share of the backfield, so I feel pretty good about it. Well, let's keep us moving.
He's my favorite player to draft.
I like it. I'm getting there with him too. He's a guy who I'm approaching end of round 2 territory.
Yeah, end of round 2. Yeah, easy. All the sites have him projected kind of mid to late third, and he's I'm totally comfortable end of round 2 taking.
For sure.
All right, I'm next, right?
Yeah, we are getting into the tier of most of these guys are round 1 guys, or maybe the very earliest part of round 2. But yeah, let's hear who you got at 6.
Yep. So my 6 might come as a little bit of a surprise, since he was kind of 4th in fantasy points per game last year, is Derrick Henry. So I think the case for Derrick Henry is what has changed from last year. He was awesome last year, his first year with the Ravens. It's scary with him and Lamar in the backfield, and he was 4th in fantasy points per game. So he was 2nd in carries, 6th in red zone touches. He had 18 total touchdowns. It's hard to imagine what's going to change. The thing I think actually has the most likelihood to change is something that'll help Henry. It's that Lamar's not going to throw 41 touchdown passes again. In 2023, he only through 24. So that 17 touchdown jump is probably not sustainable. So they'll probably score more touchdowns on the ground, which will probably help Henry. The reason I have him sixth, and not let's call it a little higher on this list, is because I think he outperformed last year based on the quality of touches that he was getting. So if you just looked at expected fantasy points, he outperformed that number by almost 5 points a game, 4.7 to be exact. I know everyone's going to say Henry's different. He is going into his age 31 season. Father Time's undefeated. I haven't touched Henry for the last 2 years, and I've regretted it because of like this cliff. And so I'm starting to get there where it doesn't matter, but I'm not totally there. I can't mention the floor without mentioning the age. But the Ravens extended him, so they clearly have some faith. So I know you have him a little higher. What do you think?
Yeah, I think this is my probably second spiciest one behind Travion on the list, maybe Chase Brown, but I actually have Henry all the way up at number 3. And I think it's as simple as what you just talked about at the tail end there. I've kind of been fearful of that cliff for a while now too, but I look at the Ravens as an extremely sharp organization, and the fact that they were willing to bring him in last year and then extend him right away this offseason just leads me to believe like their medical staff has done every check imaginable. And I just think there are very few guys in the league who have a legitimate shot at 20 rushing touchdowns, and Derrick Henry's very easily it for me. And so I think, yes, the age scares me, but that's pretty much it. I think your point about, the regression for the passing touchdowns for the Ravens offense speaks a ton to Henry's upside in the touchdown potential on the ground. And, a lot of people think, oh, Lamar Jackson, awesome rushing quarterback. He actually doesn't run a ton in the red zone and find himself in the end zone ton. It's not like he's stealing tush pushes away from Derrick Henry or anything like that. So I love the Ravens offense. Derrick Henry's a Hall of Fame level talent. And I think if he's healthy, a lock for 15 touchdowns is a crazy floor for me. And again, if I'm drafting a guy in the first round, I want as sure of a thing as possible. And somehow, despite being in his 31-year-old season, I still think Derrick Henry is as sure of a thing as possible.
Do you think he gets 300 carries again?
I don't see why not. It's hard to see otherwise. I guess the Ravens kind of like Keaton Mitchell, who's a little healthy, but they haven't really added anybody else. Their running game just so much of a headache for defenses to stop. So I kind of lean yes.
I wanted to put him lower because he doesn't catch passes, but this is the lowest I could physically put him because, what's changed? They're going to be really good again. He's going to score 18 rushing touchdowns. Yeah. All right.
It's going to be crazy. But I'll take it over to my number 6, and I think this is another one that'll probably surprise some people. I'm actually, funny enough, for as risk-averse as I am with Henry and his age and the wear and tear, I'm pretty out on McCaffrey and all the risk that comes with him. So I have him all the way down at 6. Which basically means I'm never going to be drafting him. In general, I try not to let previous injury history scare me away too much, but when it is those kind of degenerative issues, which it sounds like is what it's been for McCaffrey, especially for a running back, and a running back with his historical workload, he's 29, so he's not the 31 that Henry is, but he's on the wrong side of the age cliff for running backs as well. I acknowledge the upside is as good as it gets at the position. If he plays a full 17 games, it's probably more likely than not he's the RB1. I'd say he probably has over 50% odds of doing it, but I cannot bank on the health. Even if he's a guy who's going to average 20 to 25 points a game when healthy, I can't take the risk. I can't do it with an early pick. So I know you're a little higher on McCaffrey than I am. You're not at the, putting him in the 101 category. Tell me if I'm being just too fearful here.
Yeah, there's honestly nothing to say about him, right? I'm not going to go try to project risk. We all know the upside. Everyone carries some level of risk. So it's just at what point of the draft is the combination of floor ceiling drop off there where you take the ceiling shot because those next guys don't have that ceiling. And for me, I think, and I'd love to hear I think you take Bijan, Saquon, Jamar, CD, because those guys have the ceiling that McCaffrey has, and then obviously are way safer. They all are for various different reasons. Not without risk, but way safer. It's where you get to JJ Amon-Ra Henry is where I think let me throw the dart because the ceiling's so high. And I could hear you on any one of those three that it's stupid to take McCaffrey. I just don't know. I don't want to take him this year. I don't want to be in that position in the middle of the first round where that decision's there if I can help it. And yeah, I don't know. There's nothing to say about this guy.
Yeah.
He's awesome.
And so I missed if you mentioned this, but you do have him 4 on your list. So, I think there is a range where if you find yourself in those back half of first rounds, like you're probably a little more likely to pull the trigger than I am. But I think in most leagues, he'll get drafted before where either of us have him. And personally, that's not a risk I'm willing to take and would not advise others to do so.
So how do you think the 49ers view it? Let's talk about that a little bit, right? Because he's coming off 2 seasons, I think, before last year, where Kyle Shanahan did everything you could possibly imagine to get the ball in his hands. I think the offense revolved around that guy. Is there a scenario where the coaching staff realizes the downside? They look at last year. He only played 4 games. His Achilles is messed up. And they're like, let's tone this back a little bit.
I think they have to, right? Like, I think they have made investments in the running back position in recent years. Nothing drastic. But last year Guerrero showed some promise as a rookie. This year they drafted Jordan James. They brought in a couple, veteran type guys. So I don't think they're going to go crazy with it, but I think they have to be thinking about it somewhat. They have to at least be considering, okay, can we take McCaffrey off the field for 10 to 20% more of the snaps because we'd rather have that full 18-week season out of him and, have him healthy for the playoffs. I haven't seen anything that suggests they wouldn't. Yeah. And, I do think Kyle Shanahan, once push comes to shove, will be pretty tempted in a close game to keep McCaffrey on the field. So I don't know. They didn't make any conscious efforts to say, hey, we're bringing in a clear 2 or a clear 1B, but they've made enough small bets over the years that I'd like to think it's in the cards. And when you think about Shanahan in general, I know he's loved McCaffrey, but prior to having a McCaffrey level talent, he has always had a bit of a rotation going. So
yeah,
I don't know if he's willing to go back to that or not, but I think it has to at least be considered. And, granted, 80% of McCaffrey is still a high-end RB1.
Awesome.
Yep. But
100%.
Yeah, it's hard to say. And it's hard to account for that in the rankings, because my gut tells me he's going to get that typical McCaffrey workload, but that's what scares me more than excites me.
Yep. Agreed. All right. Next on number 5 on my list is Devon Achane. So the thing I really like about Achane is he's dominated for 2 straight seasons in very kind of different capacities. His rookie year, it was a lot of big plays on the ground. I think he averaged over 7 yards a carry, and he was an absolute game breaker, change of pace for that offense. And he was an awesome running back, as typical, as you traditionally think of as a running back. Last year was a lot different. He dominated through the air on a lot of these low average at the target, quick screen. And so he was 6th in 2024, 5th in 2023, and he had over 10 touchdowns both seasons. I know the size scares a lot of people off here, but he's a reception king, right? He in the likes of Kamara, McCaffrey. He had 592 yards through the air. Last year, 78 receptions. He was number 2 in target, 4th in routes run, 11th in yards per route run. What people forget in fantasy, for running backs, a target is more valuable than a rush, and they did everything they could to scheme him targets last year. And then they lost Jonnu Smith, his other lower ADOT brother, where they throw all these screen passes to. So there's even more opportunity for Achane. With that, so then you kind of get to the scary part is the floor case with him is you're relying on the help of 2 guys. So I mentioned Achane's a little bit of a smaller guy who has had his history of, let's call it nicks. Missed some time his rookie year. Last year, left a couple games early. And then Tua has essentially had 1 full season in a 5-year career. And Achane with Tua and Achane without Tua are 2 totally separate players. Last year with Tua, he was 22.6 points per game, which is essentially Saquon. He would have been the number 1 back. Without Tua, it was down, I think, in 8.5. So it's 2 different guys. and you're relying on two separate guys to stay healthy to give you the upside that you need. But I am comfortable taking Achane at the back of the first, early second. Wouldn't think twice about it.
Yeah. I don't have a ton to add. I think the one thing I'll categorize or to categorize this a bit is I have him in the same tier as McCaffrey. So I have Achane at 5 on my list as well, same as you, and then I have McCaffrey at 6, and I labeled that tier as just swing for the fences. Basically, it's like if these guys are what you think they are, like they have that RB1 overall potential, and not just RB1 overall, but like dominant RB1. Like they could potentially lap the field type of upside. And so it's like when I get to that point in the drafts, I feel comfortable taking them. And I think McCaffrey has more of the individual injury risk than Achane does, but Achane size alone brings risk. And then, like you said, the Tua factor as well makes that scary. So I think I'll wind up drafting Achane a little bit in some spaces because I do value him more than McCaffrey. Where I value Achane is more in line with his actual ADP. But yeah, not a ton to add. Like if he hits, just like McCaffrey, he's a potential league winner. But there is a lot of risk in banking on a running back with a workload his high at his frame.
And just remember, right, Achane this year is way different than Achane last year because you have to take him essentially at the late first, early second, where as we in our receiver show, right, there's a ton of good receivers that are going to be still on the board. Whereas last year you could throw the home run at round 3. Mm-hmm. So it's a totally different calculus. I'm taking him this year. All right, Dolan. Hit us with your next one. Let's keep moving.
Yeah, so this next one, this is where we get into my tier 2 running backs. As mentioned, I have Henry at 3, and Saquon Barkley is actually my number 4. And that may surprise a lot of people as an Eagles fan. And, you know, with a lot of people having Saquon as high as not just the number 1 running back, but in some cases the number 1 overall player. But this is another one that I think is just a little more risk aversion from me. We talked a little bit about Henry's age and workload, and the workload that Saquon Barkley had last year. There's almost no way possible that he is repeating that workload. It wasn't just a full season. It was a full season minus resting in week 18, plus a full playoff run. And I think he wound up with like total touches close to 550 or something absolutely insane like that. The magic rule of the number where running backs tend to fall off is 380 touches in a season. And so it's just a glaring red flag for me. Now, with that said, going back to what we were talking about with the 49ers and kind of taking some off McCaffrey's plate, as someone who's way more plugged in with the Eagles, I'm pretty confident they are going to make a conscious effort to take Saquon off the field some. So I think that limits his upside a tiny bit. He's not a huge pass catcher, but he's still probably the best running back in the league, running behind the best offensive line. So you can't really overthink it. I think 4 is low, but I think he just has more risk than the 3 names I have ahead of him. So I think you're probably pretty similar to me. I think you got him at what, 3, if I remember?
3. I have him at 3. I'd still easily take him over Henry. But yeah, I think we've talked about it on a previous show, the natural regression for the Eagles, right? They should throw more this year than they did last year. You talked about the touches. I think most people think this is going to happen, but no one knows where to knock him down to because he's still awesome. He's going to be on the best team in the league, behind the best offensive line in the league. And he is a good receiver. I know the Eagles didn't use him as a good receiver last year, but like historically, he's been a really good receiver. So he's number 1 in fantasy points per game last year, and nothing has changed besides the amount of wear and tear on his body. So I think this is a don't overthink it one, unless you're thinking about taking him kind of 1, 2 overall. That's where I think you have to think about it a little harder. But in anywhere from like 3 to 6, don't overthink the workload last year. He's awesome.
Yeah. I do think part of this is transparently just an emotional hedge. If something bad were to happen to Saquon and it crushed both my fantasy season and hurt the Eagles, I think that's right. Part of what's taken away a little bit from me. But again, in a tier where I have him alongside Henry, I just think Henry is slightly safer. And so that's where I give him the nod.
Yeah. Okay. You want me to hit us with the top 2? Yeah. Or we'll each do our guy. Let's do, because we have the same top 2 in different orders. So I'll do Bijan, you do Gibbs. Okay, so Bijan is my number 1 back. I think he's the best combination of skill, opportunity, and youth. His ceiling's pretty much established. He was third fantasy points per game last year. He was top 5 in carries, targets, receiving yards, rushing yards, receptions, red zone touches, route run. Number 1 in yards created. I think there's meat on the bone. Bijan didn't hit as many explosive plays last year that he's known for coming out of Texas. And they did a lot of kind of running from the snap to protect Kirk Cousins. I think that could change a little bit this year, open things up. And so I think those big plays for Bijan that weren't there last year are still in the cards this year. Why Bijan over Gibbs is it's mostly to do with the Lions. So I think the Lions, the combination of the offensive line turnover in the interior, the loss of Ben Johnson, and a healthy Demont are enough to make me lean Bijan over Gibbs, even though Gibbs is awesome. I think Gibbs is where he really, really exploded those last 4 games last year was without Demont. And so if we're assuming a healthy Demont, then I think Bijan has no backfield competition, right, of note. And so I think they're going to get him the ball, and they're going to get Drake London the ball. And we talked about it last time. The Falcons run a lot of plays. That's why I'm Bijan over you.
Yeah, I don't have a ton to add to Bijan. I mean, he's a guy who I would draft second or third overall in most spots and just be totally comfortable with it. Like, I think he checks every single box. And that's what this tier is for me.
Yep.
It's 2 running backs who check every single box. And so I think you summed that up perfectly well. So I'll get over to my Gibbs Kate, where I do have him as my 101. And it really was a lot of back and forth between him and Bijan. Like, I really went down to the wire before this podcast. But ultimately where I netted out was I think David Montgomery, in a weird way, makes Gibbs safer because it reduces his injury risk, because I don't think he's going to have one of those monster touch seasons. But I do think this is going to be the year, and I'm probably making a little too much projection into this, where Demont does take a step back and Gibbs really does establish himself in the backfield. I think historically it's been more of a 1A, 1B, but I think with Montgomery being a year older, coming off an injury, Gibbs continuing to just dominate, showing he can dominate in a larger role and truly be a fantasy god when Montgomery was out, is kind of going to cause a light bulb moment for the coaching staff. And I think they're going to look at it and say, okay, maybe we can make this more of a 1-2 instead of a 1A, 1B. And so I think Montgomery's snap share is going to decrease this year. And I think that's pretty much all going to go to Gibbs. And weirdly, the offensive line concerns don't scare me for Gibbs particularly a bunch, because I think if they're like, hey, we're struggling to run up the middle, that's more fuel for my take Montgomery off the field argument, and that'll lead to more swing passes and in these little PPR cheat codes and things like that. So I think, like you said, you've seen the ceiling case with Gibbs. It's the last couple games of the season with no Montgomery, and I think he's not going to be quite there, but I think we're going to see somewhere in between what we saw with healthy Montgomery and no healthy Montgomery. And if you average those two out, that's a top 3 running back on the season. So I'm just all in on Jahmyr Gibbs. And he is my number 1 ranked running back, because I think the Lions are going to give so many more scoring opportunities to Gibbs than Bijan will have. I think he's going to catch a ton more passes. And again, I think he does have those explosive plays that Bijan lacked, is I think what separated it for me. Like, you are going to have those couple weeks where Gibbs rips off a 75-yard touchdown, and we just haven't seen that from Bijan as much. And so I'll take that explosive week-winning upside on a more consistent basis with Gibbs.
Yeah, honestly, a point like to your case is, what if the new John Morton? What if he just wants to use Gibbs more? Right? What if he looked at Gibbs last year and like, oh, why are we splitting this way? Right? This is a change. We'll just get Gibbs is obviously a better player. He was awesome last year, so why not just give him more touches? If there was no Montgomery, I think Gibbs would be my 101. Also, but Demont, I think, still exists, and he's still going to play there. And Gibbs, to your point, right? Gibbs was number 1 in total fantasy points last year, right? So he's done it before. So you might be right on this one, but I'm taking Bijan.
Yeah, totally fair. And I think in either situation, I'm super happy with either of these guys. You know, this is a player you can really build your team around, feel extremely confident in. So I feel really good about it.
I was just quick. I think Bijan and Gibbs are so good, and that's the kind of build that I like, is if you're picking draft slot in the first round, I would go the latest position where I think, based on my league, where I could get one of those two guys. So whether that's 2, 3, 4, 5 would be kind of crazy, but that's what I like for the first round this year. Ending up with one of those two at the latest possible point.
Yeah. Totally fair. All right, we did it. We got
Boom.
10 running backs.
Yeah. 10.
A little more than 10, I
really?
guess.
We got 12.
Yeah.
We got 12. Disrespect to Jonathan Taylor. I get it. He's boring. But disrespect. He's boring, unlike this podcast. Episode 11, Crush Fantasy Football. Another one in the books.
We did it.
Man.
Take it easy, James.
We did it.